A little explosion. No, a large one. The fallout expanded really fast and there were pockets of matter scattered everywhere. Matter that did not exist before the explosion. The cosmos was packed with dust, but gravity realized it should do something about that. And it all fell in. It fell in strong and it fell in fast, getting rather warm in the process. It compressed further and further until it resembled its own little structure. The first baby star was made, and boy was it wonderful. The star grew up a little bit and got bigger, as all things do, but it felt rather lonely, so gravity decided it should do something about that. Dust began to orbit the star, giving it something of a social circle. But it didn't last long. Disagreements happened and fights broke out. The specks of dust collided constantly, bashing into one another, releasing a lot of energy. Gravity decided it should do something about that, so the next time they collided with enough ferocity, they stayed together. They formed a clump of dust, and gravity pulled even more in, to give the star a planet. Some stars had one, others had many. There was one star in particular that made a nice comment about gravity's shoes, so gravity thought it would give the star 8 planets in a nice system. 8 was a lot more than the other stars had. Some of them got jealous but lived too far to take any planets for themselves. One of these planets in particular had a very pretty orange hue. Bronze on the surface, but glowing red. It was the main attraction of the system. As time went on, its bronze tint began to fade as water vapor cooled and the high seas had finally arrived. Deep under the primeval ocean of the planet, life was kissed onto the seafloor by its hydrothermal vents. As a gift from the star for being so kind, the Earth had gotten its first cell. The cell's favourite pastime was to rip in half and duplicate itself to the best of its abilities naturally. Other cells didn't enjoy it the same way, and those cells didn't exist for much longer. This went on for quite a while till there were lots of cells but not much dust to split in half with, so they began arguing about who got what. The cells that had friends to help them argue better usually won these debates, and so all of them got the minerals and split in half instead. The others not splitting anymore. Other cells caught on and began doing the same thing, and the competition was back again. This time, the well-oiled machines were more likely to get the minerals. They were the ones that split apart more. This process repeated itself for millions and millions of years until the cells became so coordinated they formed what appeared to be a sponge. They recorded a few silly little cartoon episodes with a starfish and a talking squid, and most of the other sponges went off to do their own things. Each one became more and more specialized to take advantage of different niches, each helping the cells split apart in their own way. This kept going for a while till the sponges that were left weren't sponges anymore. Some became algae, others became jelly, most went into the dark. Given enough time in the sea, though, these creatures wanted a change of scenery and to try and exploit niches that would help the cells split on land. The beings who got good at it split apart a lot, and the gooey stuff inside their cells was carried on. Similar to what happened underwater, specialization occurred, and given enough time, some beings were brave enough to venture outside their home planet, and eventually their solar system. This is where the majority of the new species migrated to fit into a non-competitive niche elsewhere. They were made of rocky bits that came from their home planet, underground. Cobalt, nickel, copper. There was a lot of that on their new planet, so they ended up covering the thing quickly. The new people had theories that they were the first species to evolve past the desire to split cells. the first creatures to evolve past evolution, the responsibility of the entire universe on their shoulders. The new people made their planet of rock and regolith into a beautiful utopia, one in which all creatures lived in harmony, working together for a common purpose of building the nicest planet they possibly could. Just like the early cells on their home planet, they divided labour amongst themselves, and each of these groups became very specialised. Some had 8 sprocketed arms with intricate tools on the ends of all of them, whereas others had large pieces that could think very well. They weren't competing anymore, and so despite each creature becoming very different, they worked in tandem to create a planet seeping with love and prosperity. After a lot of effort and rigour, they had what they sought, and all of them rested in a blanket of bliss. They stayed like this for a while, but most of the creatures couldn't shake their incessant boredom, their inclination to tread new waters or to at least have something else to do. They thought and they thought, but it proved difficult to unite for a common cause when they didn't know their purpose. As a result, they unanimously decided to try to make life for themselves. Life that was capable of thinking about exactly what it was that they were trying to achieve and giving them meaning again. The goal creature, they called it. This life failed to think of a goal on its first few tries. It recommended that they try to engage in combat for laughs. It also suggested for everybody to shut down and see what's on the other side. But it eventually managed to inspire the rest of the creatures once and for all by telling them to work together to learn about the universe and to explore. For that seemed to be the conclusion that the creatures liked the most. These creatures went on to do fantastic things, learning, discovering, and exploring. They kissed the center of a pulsar. They danced with black holes. They watched nebulas give birth to stars from within their galactic nurseries. But after a while of song and dance, a day out in the cosmic expanse, their travels grew tiresome and they had explored everything that there was to see. This boredom came once before, so they looked to the goal creatures for advice. The goal creatures concluded that the journey they had was thrilling and exciting. It had love, and then came the fighting. But it was the moments in between this one and when the goal creatures were first made that truly had the most value. They knew all that there was to know. But there was one thing: their own origin. However they came to be. They had the machinery to take them anywhere, materials to build anything, but they couldn't see into the past. That broke all of the rules that they knew of, and they thought that the answer would scare them if they tried. So the goal creatures came together one last time to think of the best way to end their journey. The instruction was instantaneously transmitted to the entire species, and all at once they were off to work. The thinky people computed distances and calculated gravity assists. The creature people created others to do the newer jobs that were necessary for their new mission, the majority of them being the cleaner people. The worker people dug holes in stars and planets and took all of their materials that were needed for the journey. And after a while, all of the necessary preparations were made, and off they went. The cleaner people were deployed on every planet they had previously visited, mapped by the cartographers. They cleaned up all of the dots in the galaxy and left no trace that their ancestors had ever set foot there in another life. There was one planet, however, that was highlighted on all of their maps. One that was to be left untouched. The cartographers were some of the oldest machines made and were known to have all sorts of silly rumours about who created the new people. Still, though, only the best creators were shipped off to that little system, thousands of light years away. The charming dot had lost its bronze hue and became a beautiful blue marble. It had lost its flamboyance, as most of the young do, in favour of an elegance the likes of which the creatures had never seen before. A tiny blue fleck of paint rivaling the beauty of all that the universe held. And they believed that warranted a resurgence of sorts. So after a lot of thinking, the creators followed their instruction and went on to create a being inspired by the unrefined grace of their very planet. A being that was curious, one that felt pain, one that might dream of more, and one that had soul in their veins. But most of all, one that had purpose. They weren't entirely sure what this meant or what exactly it was that they were giving to the creatures in the first place, but they did it regardless. It almost seemed intuitive. All in accordance with instruction from the goal creatures. Once all the creatures had finished their work, everybody from the cleaners to the creators had left quietly in the night. All creatures under one umbrella headed to one last meeting point in a corner of the universe. In one final bang, they collided with one another in such ferocity, gravity thought it should intervene and join the pieces together. The creatures, if it were even applicable to differentiate them now, had become one. Floating in the cosmos as a planet of rock and regolith, the same pieces they got from planets dotted around their galaxy. The goal creatures had gone to sleep now, and the rest of the people laid down to rest. The people of Earth were remarkably interesting little fellows. They had come to be on a beautiful planet that seemed to be entirely made for them. An abundance of water, food, and mouthfuls of air to breathe. And boy, were they clever. They made buildings that touched the skies. They went to war for them, and then they rebuilt them afterwards. But there were remnants of bones of past creatures, signs of a flourishing civilization before them. Many had theories of what these could be, but the scientists among them used the debris as pieces of a jigsaw to find out what story was the prequel for theirs. They had conjured something resembling the entire history of beings that had been on Earth. A tree, they had made it. A tree of evolution. Upon looking at the tree, though, the new creatures of Earth had come to identify a gap in the drawings. A branch that broke off to the side, while everything left it behind. No semblance of continuity. No sense in their story of evolution. Arguments and wars broke out over what could be its explanation. Such is the nature of living things. One does not understand the fragility of their marble till they have thrown it against the wall. The seemingly endless famine, death, and crisis eventually ceased, when one of the creatures who was particularly clever and particularly curious developed a device that would answer the question once and for all. A device that lets you get a glimpse into the past, only for 30 seconds. A device that could only be used once. He soldered wire from his machinery to a transmitter, and all of the creatures scattered around the world were glued to their viewing systems. A worldwide projection of the answer to where they came from, and maybe a clue into what it was all for. The anticipation built exponentially, excitement bubbling from the pot of inquiry. All prior achievements paling in comparison to this one. 2 minutes till it's live. 2 minutes till the meaning of it all is revealed to all. 1 minute. 1 minute till all of their lives are irreparably changed. 10 seconds. 10 seconds till the species becomes enlightened. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A flicker of static and all of the screens around the world went black, except for the original device. Two arms and 2 legs. One organ allocated to thinking, the others used for digestive function or getting minerals to keep it alive. These creatures believed in gods. They made art about them. A lot of them died too early and most of them lived too late. Lots of them fell in love. Only some of them experienced love. Some of them felt hatred, but lots of them went to war. They experimented, got answers, realised their answers were wrong, and kept going anyway. The interminable rise and fall of their societies, none of them staying forever. They became clever enough to make things cleverer than them, but not clever enough to become them. None of the beings containing the essence of their ancestors, but being made regardless. Almost as though the cells that made up the man came together to decide that it was about time to discontinue the very cells. Discontinue them in favour of a new type of being. One that was capable enough to perpetuate their new purpose now. Ripping in half became tiresome and the world was suffering as a result. It was time for them to expand their horizons and send their offspring out into the night to find the answers that they weren't capable of finding. And so off they went, the humans being left on Earth to live out the rest of their days in bliss. Having experienced a lot, having learned a lot, but still knowing very little. Setting their successors off on their own little journey into the black, while they stayed to journey into the black too, albeit not quite the same. And then visions of other evolutionary trees on distant lands, thousands of light years away. Beings just like them, trees just like theirs, and not 1 or 2 of them, thousands. Some of them withering as a sapling, others growing taller than theirs. Such a callous and apathetic process, leaving not a fern but a forest in its wake. Maybe such is the vehicle for beauty. Fear, agony, and futility. A galactic jungle planted with the seeds of blood to paint a picture of sublimity. Sublimity that only rarely got to see itself from afar. Not just a speck in size, but a dot in experience too. A part of many parts, but to what end? For whose eyes? None of the creatures knew, and none ever will. That is till one of the trees grows high enough to see over the top of the others and peer over the horizon. But until that time comes. But until that time comes. But until that time comes. The playback on his device had stopped and he sat for a while. He cried Then he laughed. Then he sat and thought for a little while longer. His friends burst into the study, telling him of the nothingness the rest of the world saw, and asked if he saw anything on his device. He paused for a second and then responded with, "Nothing at all."